Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, it's new amp day, or more specifically old amp day, because over my shoulder there is a Dr. Z Mazerati. Now, as regulars to this channel will know, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Z. I've loved everything of Mike's that I've ever plugged into. And this is an amp that's been on my radar for a little while, but it's not an amp that Dr. Z currently makes. The original Mazerati hasn't been made, really, since 2006. This particular Mazerati dates to 2003, so it's a fairly old amp now in the grand scheme of things. But this is another amp from Dr. Z's history that has a Joe Walsh connection. Quite a few amps from Dr. Z's history have a Joe Walsh connection, to be honest. Now, the first ever amp that Mike made was called the Carmen Ghia, and he still makes the amp to this day. And Mike's told this story plenty of times online. I'll summarise it very briefly here. But that's an amp that started life as a reverb unit destined for Hammond organs. And Mike was able to buy a few of these chassis, adapt them into guitar amps, and Dr. Z was born, and the rest was history. Now, one day Joe Walsh came into his shop and bought a Carmen Ghia combo, and a few days later came back saying how much he loved it and could Mike make him a 100 watt version, which Mike couldn't do, but what he could do was double the wattage. And the Mazerati was born. So all this amp is, really, is a Carmen Ghia with twice the power. Now, this particular Mazerati is what's known as a version 2. And the only real difference between version 1 and version 2, I think, is that this one has a much bigger output transformer. It gives the amp a bigger sound and just allows the full frequency range to be reproduced in a sort of robust way. That's the only difference between version 1 and version 2. After this amp came the Mazerati GT, which is a very different amp, a lot more gain. It's not really a Carmen Ghia at all. So if you're after a Carmen Ghia, but with twice the power, a version 1 or version 2 Mazerati is the one you want. Now, this is a very, very simple amplifier. You only get two knobs, volume and tone. Volume, very self-explanatory, but the tone control kind of sweeps the mid-range. And it's a very brave decision to go with just a single tone knob on any amp or pedal, because in order to make it work, you need the core sound of the amp or the pedal to be absolutely dialed into perfection. But this amp is. The tone control just gives you different flavours of wonderful. I'm never left wanting. I never want to have a bass and a treble and a mid control. This single tone control does everything. So it's an amp that has been very, very well designed. Now, in the back of this amp is a Celestion Vintage 30. Now, this particular amp had a different speaker in it when I bought it, but I've put a Vintage 30 in for this demo video because that's what this 1x12 would have had in as stock. And today I'm just going to do the usual thing of putting it through its paces with a variety of different guitars. I'm primarily just going to crank it up brutally loud here in the room, but I am going to throw a few pedals on as well because this amp takes pedals superbly well. So this is in some ways a slightly pointless demo because if you like the sound of this amp, you can't buy one unless you want a Carmen Ghia. But weirdly, there are pretty much no demos of the original Mazerati anywhere online. So if you come across a used Mazerati and you want to know how it sounds, hopefully this video will be just the ticket. So without further ado, folks, here we go. So there we are, folks, the version 2 Mazerati from Dr. Z. Now please do comment underneath, let me know what you thought of the amp today. I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks down in the comments section. Now, this is an amp that just sounds wonderful with any guitar, at any position on the tone knob, and at any level of gain. It's just simplicity in its purest form, and I love that about this design. Now, the reason I've been waiting out to find a Mazerati rather than the Carmen Ghia is I typically prefer kind of slightly higher powered amps, because to me, I've got like 18 watt Marshalls and things here, and they sound beautiful when you record them, but playing them, to me, I always want at least 30 watts. So a double powered version of the Carmen Ghia is exactly what I was after. So I'm so glad I was able to find this Mazerati used and jump on it, because I'm looking forward to using it in a lot of demo videos going forwards. It's just a wonderful, very refined amp. Now, as I said in the intro, this amp had a different speaker in it when I bought it, and I put the vintage 30 in today because that's what it would have originally had in it. I have been experimenting with different speakers in the last few days, and to be honest, my favourite sound with this amp is through Fein speakers, because the mid-range on this amp, I don't want to say it's aggressive, it's not really, but it has that kind of sort of 1, 2, 3K sort of thing going on anyway. And with the Vintage 30, that really hypes that kind of frequency range. The Fane speakers are slightly flatter in that frequency range, and this sounds, to me, it has elements of Vox and Marshall, as you would expect, but it has a bit of a high watt thing going on as well, and high watts and Fane speakers just go together perfectly. So I think something like the Fane A60 is the speaker I'm going to put in this amp longer term, because I think that it just kind of soothes that mid-range a little bit in a very pleasing way. But with the Vintage 30, it does sound astonishing as well. There's nothing wrong with the Vintage 30. It sounds great in this amp. But those are just my thoughts, folks. Please do let me know yours. I love hearing from you guys on all this sort of stuff. So thank you ever so much for watching, folks. I hope this video was interesting and useful, and it's good to have a single demo of the old Mazerati out there in YouTube land. Please do carry on subscribing. I know I always say it, but it makes a big difference when you hit subscribe. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.